Okay, it looks like we've had quite a few folks join us in today. We're excited to get started. So officially hello and welcome to the third customer and community meeting for RTD System-Wide Fair Study and Equity Analysis. I'm Colleen Molesky and I'm honored to be hosting our session this evening. Next slide, please. So I want to start by giving you a little bit of an overview of what you'll experience today. We'll start by giving some background and context on the study itself and what it hopes to accomplish. We'll spend the majority of our time together learning more about two fair structures that are currently on the table, as well as other policies and programs that have been developed as a part of the study. And I want you to know you will have ample time to ask questions. We've built in a lot of time to learn more about what you're interested in knowing the most about. And you'll also have the opportunity to provide some feedback, both from polling, but also feedback in the chat box. We really want to hear your ideas about each of these alternatives and the policies and programs on the table. Next slide, please. So throughout the evening, you're going to hear from many of the RTD and FAIR study team members, but I want to make sure that I introduce our three primary presenters tonight. We have Bill Soroy, Chris Quinn, and Carl Green Jr., who all serve as the project management team on the FAIR study. Next slide, please. And before we get started, I also want to make sure that you feel comfortable with the ways that you are able to engage during the meeting. So one of the top ways to engage is by asking questions. And at any time, you can find the Q&A button, which is down at the bottom of your screen, and submit your question. We may respond with a typed response, or we may respond out loud. And I want you to know if there are many similar questions, we may combine your question with others that are on the same topic. Our goal is to answer as many questions as possible in the next 90 minutes, but if we do not get to your question, just know you may also find the response in the meeting summary after the meeting, which will be on the FAIR Study website, which is rtd-denver.com/fairstudy. If you're joining us by phone, you can also visit the FAIR Study website or call 303-299-6000 during business hours to ask questions or post comments. Beyond questions, you'll also have the opportunity to provide feedback and ideas. So this will be where you'll use the chat box function to submit feedback, which will be used as part of the qualitative data we collect in this stage of the study. So in the chat box, you'll be able to send comments to all hosts and panelists. And please do try to make sure your questions are in the Q&A box and the feedback is in the chat box, which we will obviously monitor the chat box for questions, but please do try to make sure that the questions are in the Q&A box so we get to them this evening. The last way you may engage tonight is actually through a series of polls we'll have. And when you see a pop-up on your screen, you'll simply select your response and click submit. And we'll get a little bit of practice with that right now. So let's go to the next slide and launch our first poll. I'd first like to make sure that we are grounding in place and getting a sense of where each of our participants are from this evening. So you should see a question popping up on your screen asking which county you live in. RTD services 8 counties across the Front Range. So that's Adams, Arapahoe, Boulder, Broomfield, Denver, Douglas, Jefferson, and Weld. So please take a moment to share which of those counties you live in. And if you do live in another county, welcome. And you can select other and put your the name of your county where you're joining us from in the chat box. So we'll close the poll and give you a sense of the results for the evening. Many of you joining from Denver, also Arapahoe, and some joining from Adams, Boulder, and Jefferson. So welcome, we're so glad that you're here tonight. We'll launch our second poll, and this is to get a little bit of a sense of who's joined us before and who may be calling in for the first time. So as I mentioned before, this is the third of our FAIR study, customer and community meetings. So we'd love to know if you joined us either in April or June, if you've been at both of our meetings, or if this is your first FAIR study call. Okay. It looks like many of you are here for the first time, so welcome, and welcome back to those of you who have been with us before. And thanks so much for giving us a little bit of information about who you are. That not only gives us data, but it also allows you to make sure that you're comfortable with the polling feature and are able to give us feedback later in the call. So I'd love to dive in, and we're going to start with Carl. Over to you to provide some background on the FAIR study.
Yes, thank you so much, Colleen, and good evening, everyone. I'm glad that you are all here tonight with us tonight. So to open things up, what is the study? So for those of you that joined us in April or June, we're glad to see you again. And welcome to all who are attending their first customer and community meeting tonight. And if you are joining us for their first time, which about 58% has indicated that this is their first community and customer meeting as part of the system-wide FAIR study and equity analysis, welcome. And in addition to that, I just wanted to mention that I will be providing a brief background on what the study is and why we are doing it. And at the tail end of the presentation, we'll provide the website so you can play a little bit of a catch up, but we'll provide a brief overview of the study as we know it today. Perfect. So the RTD launched its system-wide FAIR study and equity analysis earlier this year in response to feedback from customers that our fares are expensive and are difficult to understand. So here's the study overview. The study is intended to develop a new fare structure, policies, and programs to reflect three key goals. The first is equity, which we want to ensure access to our services to be fair and equitable, and particularly for customers who are members of historically marginalized groups, as well as financially burdened or transit reliant. The second goal, affordability, is to ensure that our fares are aligned with the value of the services received. And finally, simplicity. We want to ensure that our fare structure is easy to understand and to utilize. Next slide. So again, the study kicked off dating back to April of 2022, and to date, we have had two key milestones. In the spring, during milestone 1, we received feedback through community focus groups, stakeholder panels, customer and community meetings, and a public survey on the challenges, pain points on the current fare structure. We used that initial feedback to develop some conceptual options, which we shared with the public earlier this summer. From there, we used that feedback, we've collected it, and we also took into consideration the financial and operational modeling, and we're able to identify two possible fare structures that could help RTD achieve its three goals of equity, simplicity, and affordability. We will then use that feedback gathered in this round of customer and community engagement to create a final recommendation, and that recommendation will be announced and available for public comment and a public hearing in early 2023. And then lastly, the RTD Board of Directors will then decide on the new fare structure in the upcoming year. Next slide, please. So now let's take a deeper dive or provide further detail about how these alternatives were developed. Next slide. So again, RTD, as we stated earlier on, we are utilizing a very community and customer-centric approach in this fare study. That is paramount and most important to RTD for the communities and customers that we serve. There will be multiple opportunities for customer and community engagement, and we have answered on that promise to ensure that we are engaging with our community. And we are grateful to the more than 3,000 community members who have participated in the surveys, the focus groups led by local community partners, stakeholder panels, and the customer and community meetings dating back to April and June. Next, we'd like to particularly recognize the partners who have gone door to door, hosted community events and focus groups, and engaged with customers at bus stops, our train stations, to help get the voices of the community members they serve. They were integral as far as being able to meet the moment to ensure that we are ensuring that we are hearing underrepresented populations. And then next, I would like to discuss the feedback that we've heard from the public And our project team has also done some extensive modeling that takes into account additional considerations. Those additional considerations are the agency's financial sustainability, to operational and technological feasibility, to also taking a look at what are the best practices of other transit agencies across the country. And then one more important item is what are the potential impacts on Title VI or minority or low income customers. And then lastly, the ability of those alternatives to help RTD achieve the goals, as I stated, and it'll be a common theme throughout this presentation of the fare study goals of equity, simplicity, and affordability. Next slide. So now let's get a quick preview of the two alternatives. Under alternative A, this is looking to lower prices in the same fare structure that is currently in place. However, it will retain the local, regional, and airport fare levels. Under alternative B, this is looking to simplify the fare structure by combining local and regional fares while maintaining an airport fare. And with this, prices are lowered for some, but not all customers under this alternative. Next slide, please. All right, so now we'll take a deeper dive into these alternatives. But first, I wanted to give you some examples of what actually, let me refresh here. So I just wanted to make note that we'll be presenting on these two different fare alternatives, but this is not necessarily an indicator of what the ultimate final recommendation will look like. So I just wanted to take pause and let you all know that even though we'll be showing and taking a deeper dive on these fare alternatives, it may not ultimately be what the final recommendation would look like. But please note that customer and community feedback regarding these alternatives and other policies and programs will help inform the recommended alternative. And then lastly, the customer and community feedback we received in this round of engagements will inform the final fare structure, policies, and programs. And then once we finalize or move forward, once we finalize the recommendation that is developed through customer and community feedback, our community will have a chance to provide feedback on this final recommendation. With that being said, I will now pass it over to Chris to take a deeper dive into the alternatives. Thank you.
Thanks, Carl. Next slide, please. So, as Carl mentioned, we are going to talk a little bit more about the individual alternatives, and I know he gave you a little bit of a teaser on what those are going to look like. But before we even get into those, I want to just real quickly go over our existing fare structure so that you can see how the new alternatives compare to what we're proposing. So the slide you see up here right now shows there's a little bit of there's a table that shows what the fares are by the different service types that we have. And this is where it starts to get a little bit complicated. And this is one of the reasons why we have heard from our customers that the system isn't always easy to use. For this particular slide, it's showing the fare structure for those customers that are paying full price. Now, in general terms, the structure is split into three distance-based fares. So we have a local, a regional, and an airport fare system or structure. Now, in the case of the rail system, that's divided into 4 zones, and anytime a customer crosses, anytime a customer travels more than 2 zones, they have to pay a regional fare. If they're in only 1 or 2 zones, then they pay the local fare. And then the airport has its own fare. So any trips that either originate or end at the airport pay the airport fee. In general, the buses don't use the zones, but some routes like the Flatiron Flyer, the RX from Brighton, the EV from Evergreen, those are distance-based and may require a regional fare depending on how far somebody is traveling. Then we also have, based on the amount of time somebody's traveling, we have a 3-hour pass, a day pass, and a monthly pass. So that's what's out there right now. And so as we go into what the alternatives are, we'll also keep showing this so you can see how each one of the alternatives does compare to what we have today. Next slide, please. So first one is alternative A. So as Carl mentioned, as we went over the alternatives, the first one, alternative A, keeps the existing fare structure we have now. So we would still have the distance-based fares with both the local, or with all three, the local, the regional, and the airport. But now, in this case, all of the fares would be lowered. How did we get here? In our initial public meetings or survey, what we've heard a lot from the public is that the fares are rather expensive. So what can we do to decrease the fares, with an emphasis on lowering local fare and the monthly passes, while also maintaining the current service levels. And also we had the desire to reward our frequent customers as well as lower the airport fare. So then the next slide will show a little bit more detail of what we're actually looking at. So if you look at the tables, just as a reminder, the red box, the red table on the top, that's the existing fare structure. And then the table at the bottom, the blue one, is alternative A, which we'll talk about right now. So you can compare the cells on the table to see how the prices change. And on some of the upcoming slides, we'll show how it really matters for different types of customers. But one of the things we do want to note right off the bat is, if you look, as an example, for the local, a 3-hour pass would go from $3 to $2.75, and correspondingly, no matter what distance of service that you happen to travel, your cost would go down. Benefits of alternative A are they would lower the cost of travel for all customers. Monthly pass would also be lowered, so that would reward our frequent customers. And then also the expectation is that we would still maintain the existing service levels as they are right now. Next slide, please. Now, some of the trade-offs, though, of alternative A, while we would be lowering the prices for everyone, no matter what type of service you're traveling on, we would not be changing the structure. So we still have the complexity of the system where if you're traveling in multiple fare zones, you would have to know what ticket to buy or what you should be paying for that service. So while it's lower cost for everyone, we still have some of the complexity and that's in the existing system. Next slide, please. So now we're going to walk through in the next few slides what it means for individual customer types. So this first one is an example if you're a local customer. So just making up as an example, if you take the 15, the 0, the 31, in my case, the number 6 bus, any of those local buses, right now, if you're a full paying customer, you would pay $3 for a $3 for a 3-hour pass, $6 for a day pass, and $114 for the monthly pass. That would go down to $275 for the 3-hour pass, reduction down to $550 from $6 for the day pass, and then the monthly pass would drop from $114 down to $88. So pretty good savings, especially for the monthly pass. But as we mentioned before, all of the service types would see a service reduction. So on the next slide, we'll show now what it would mean for a regional customer. So you would pay, if you're a regional customer traveling on, like I said, the RX, EV, Flatiron Flyer, any of those buses, you would see your fare go down by 25 cents for the 3-hour pass, 50 cents for the day pass, and a pretty substantial savings, $40 for the monthly pass. And then the next slide shows if you are an airport customer, what would that mean? Minor savings on the 3-hour pass, $10.50 to $10, but where you see some, again, a fairly substantial discount would be from the monthly pass would drop from $200 down to $160, so there would be a $40 savings per month for the airport. customers. Next slide, please. Now, just in general terms, Carl had gone over at the beginning what the study goals were: equity, affordability, and simplicity. So what this slide shows is how does alternative A stack up against those goals? Under the goal of equity, we would see some substantial benefits to low-income and minority customers. It's our expectation that they would receive the greatest decrease in costs for the system. We would have lower local fare and monthly pass prices. From an affordability standpoint, it also scores reasonably well. All customers would benefit, and however, we would retain the distance-based fare, so you're paying for, basically you pay for what you get or how far you travel. And we would have some pretty substantial monthly pass decreases. Now on the simplicity goal, not quite as good because we're not seeing, the complexity of the system is still there. So on that one, we don't score as well. So you see the green for equity, green for affordability, but the yellow or the caution light or whatever we want to call it for simplicity. So next slide, please.
Excellent. Well, Chris, thank you for that initial overview of Alternative A. And I have seen that we have lots of great questions coming in from the chat box. So we're going to start with questions around Alternative A and around the fare study as well. And Bill and Carl, feel free to come back up if you'd like to also support Chris in answering them. So let's get started a little bit with what was considered in the development of these alternatives. One attendee wants to know, has RTD examined different pricing for bus versus rail? So an idea might be that all bus service could be local while the rail might cover zones.
Yeah, we did, that question did come up at one of our first public meetings that we did have, or outreach meetings that we had. However, in the surveys and other feedback that we've received from the public, there didn't seem to be too much of an appetite for having to pay different fares for whether you get on the bus or the light rail, especially for those people who use both modes, bus, train, regional bus, local bus to travel. So that was something that because of the other input that we'd received, which seemed to be stronger favoring against that, or I guess that's double negative, but we didn't seem to have much support for that. So that's not an option that we moved forward.
Thank you, Chris. We have another question around fares and their importance as a source of income. So one participant asked that said, my understanding is that fares represent a minority of RTD's annual income. Was Zero Fare for Better Air a pilot study? And is there a scope for making this permanent? And if not, why was it trialed?
Yeah, good question. So the Zero Fare for Better Air that we had in August, that allowed all RTD services to be, well, no cost for the month of August. That was actually, we were able to apply for and receive a grant from the state of Colorado to fund that. So essentially the state backfilled 80% of the cost of that project. It's a 2-year grant, so we're hoping to be able to do the exact same thing, capitalize on that again next year. But given the fact that that was relying on state funding, it's not something that we considered with moving forward as part of the fare study. And one of the reasons that we didn't look at zero fares is, even though, as the questioner pointed out, that fares don't make up a huge percentage of the operating costs that we face, it's still enough that if we were to go with a zero fare recommendation, we would highly likely have to have some pretty substantial service cuts to account for that. And we'd expect that there would also be additional demand, thereby even increasing service costs even more. So moving forward as part of this, while we certainly are looking at lowering fares through both of the alternatives, we're not looking at zero fares.
Excellent. Thank you, Chris. We have a question around making sure that the fare alternatives are also sensible, in addition to equitable, affordable, and simple. And this participant is wondering how this will address perhaps families traveling together. So if a family of 4 is traveling round trip to the airport, it's going to cost them $80 for a weekend trip, even if that's only traveling by a few stations. So curious of how the fare study may address families traveling together and the affordability of that.
Yeah, so, oh.
I say I'll take
somebody else-
that one.
Oh, yeah, go
You
ahead,
know,
Bill.
what I would say is I think that, you know, we've heard the issue about families in particular, and one of the things that we'll talk about a little bit is, you know, how we're going to address youth and youth fares, because I do think that from a family and somebody who's, you know, has 3 kids himself, I mean, having a youth fare, which, you know, right now is 70% discount, is, you know, significant. And if you have, again, assuming it's a family of 4 with kids, that, you know, 2 of the 4 are going to have that 70% discount. And one of the things that we'll highlight in a little bit is we are looking at the possibility of even looking at a 0 fare for youth, which would be, you know, no fare. So you'd just be paying 2, you know, full adult fares. So it would be $40 and not 80. So again, we are trying to look at that in different ways. And we understand that, you know, that traveling to and from the airport can be a burden to people, but I think we're looking at versus just lowering the airport fare, other ways of dealing with it.
And I would also offer up too, just thinking about the 3 goals that were established as part of this fare study and equity analysis, is really the work really began last fall and in early January, February of establishing these 3 goals. And those were the 3 based off community and customer feedback is how we landed on those 3 goals. And I would ultimately say that that sensibility is baked in or intertwined within these 3 goals as part of this fare study. A great question.
Thank you, Carl. Thank you, Bill. So there's a question here around fare enforcement. So will fare enforcement be simpler by drivers and by security if RTD goes to a unitary fare system?
Carl, you want to take that one?
And just for more clarification on the unitary,
And they do note, except for the airport. So I think they mean if local and regional are combined, will fare enforcement be simpler?
So I know there's a few different initiatives that our Transit Police Division is working through, and in part with this fare study and equity analysis project, as it relates to what the potential changes will be. So whether it's our fare media and the fare structure changes, we are working hand in hand with the Transit Police as it relates to fare inspection. So I know that'll be upcoming. I can't necessarily answer the question directly, but what I can say that we have a few different initiatives to ensure that our fare enforcement team is matched up or mirrored up to what we're trying to achieve. And that's what I would say, offer up for that particular question.
And let me add, I think I can generally speak just because of my experience and particularly riding rail where you have a regional or a local fare. I think having that combined I think certainly could reduce conflicts with our fare enforcement people. You know, when somebody gets on and they have a local fare, but yet they travel outside of those 2 zones, I think there is that to reduce that conflict. And just anecdotally, you know, we've been out at various facilities and we've heard from a couple of bus drivers in particular who said, boy, it'd be really a lot easier if you made those regional and locals the same, because it would reduce conflict on my end. So anecdotally, we've heard that from some of the operators. And I think, you know, just from observations, I think, you know, it would tend to reduce conflicts, I think, overall.
I would offer up, thanks for triggering my memory, Bill, just thinking about when we did our focus group with our operators or even fare inspectors, was a majority of the issues that folks have, or our operations team, it has to do with fare disputes. So with this fare study, thinking about working to achieve those 3 goals, but also looking at simplicity is something that will reduce some of those conflicts and pain points. So great point, Bill.
And on that note, it looks like a lot of the questions that are coming up are actually about some of the, first of all, the one we're talking about right now is about simplifying the system, which is actually alternative B. So I'm going to move us, it looks like there aren't any more questions specific just to alternative A. So Chris, I'm going to move us into introducing alternative B. If you have a question in the queue, know that we see it and we will get to it. We just want to start doing, we want to make sure you have all the information before we get to some of those questions that are in the future. So Chris, we'll move back over to you to start on alternative B.
Okay. So for alternative B, the intent of this one is to simplify the fare structure, and we do that by combining the local, the regional fares in order to make it easier to understand. Now, this alternative, though, would maintain the airport fare level. How did we get here? Here again, community feedback shaped this by, with the input that we've received that the system is too complicated. And in fact, over a quarter of the respondents on our very first survey said that their biggest challenge with the current fare system was just trying to understand when they have to purchase a local, a regional, or an airport fare. And it was one of the top comments in our community and partner focus groups that we've held as well. In addition, of those who asked RT to decrease fares, 36% of those suggested that the best way to do that would be by eliminating the higher fares for the regional services, and about 41% encouraged making the monthly pass less expensive. We also heard requests to reward frequent customers with a price discount. And then this is where it gets a little bit complicated. Community feedback was somewhat split on whether customers should pay more to travel longer distances. So this alternative only includes a price premium for the furthest distance traveled, which is the airport. So on the next slide, we can take a look at what the proposed fare structure would be for alternative B. So on this slide, just similar to how we went through alternative A, you can see on the top, the table that's on the top, the existing structure, so you can compare the two. And if you compare the cells on the table, you can see how the prices change. We'll dive detailed into that again in the next couple of slides, just showing, as we did before, what it means for a local, regional, or airport traveler. But just a couple of the benefits I do want to highlight before we go any further. The specific benefits to B is just a single fare for all non-airport travel, which means a much lower regional fare. Obviously, you have the simplicity and also a much lower monthly pass, and only one monthly pass for all travel. So if you buy a monthly pass, doesn't matter if you're traveling to the airport, making regional trips or local trips, the monthly pass would cover it all. And also under alternative B, service levels would remain the same, which was also one of our customers' priorities. Now on the next slide, we show some of the trade-offs of alternative B. Now one of the big things that may pop out, if you were looking at the two tables, the existing versus the proposed alternative B, you would see that local customers and infrequent travelers may not benefit from the lower costs. So local customers would pay about the same. And in addition, because the current regional trips would be charged the same as local trips, the fares then are no longer accounting for distance. So somebody who, make up an example, travels 10 blocks on Colfax is paying the same as somebody who's getting on the bus, up in Evergreen or something, coming all the way down into Denver. So if you're a regular customer, though, on the next couple of slides, we'll walk through what this alternative would mean for you. So you see on the first slide, if you're a local customer, you can see the customers highlighted on what you would pay. Fare prices don't change for the 3-hour or the day passes for the local customer. However, local customers would receive around a 16% reduction on the monthly pass. And it's important to keep in mind that the monthly pass now would give access to all destinations throughout the RT service area, including the airport. Now on this next slide, this one shows what somebody who takes advantage of our current regional services would pay. As you can see, the regional customers receive a pretty significant benefit, a savings of around 43% on the 3-hour and the day passes, and more than 50% reduction on a monthly pass. And then the next slide shows what it would mean for an airport customer. So here again, the highlighted part, the red on the top and the amber on the bottom, show what an airport customer would pay. Airport customers would see a 50-cent reduction in the day pass, but they would see a pretty substantial reduction in the monthly pass that would go down 50%. And then under alternative B, a frequent airport customer would only need to ride to the airport 10 times before reaching what we're calling the monthly fare cap, now that we're introducing fare capping, and any trips beyond that would become free of charge. Now on the next slide, we show how alternative B performs against the goals that we had established for the study. And again, the reminder of that is equity, affordability, and simplicity. So against the first goal of equity, alternative B is pretty much neutral impact. So under this alternative, there's no decrease in the local fare, which happens to be used by more of our financially burdened customers. Instead, the decreases in the regional fares largely tend to benefit higher income and non-minority customers. They would be the ones to experience the greatest decrease in average fare than the low income and minority customers would. And then to offset that, RTD would in fact focus on additional discount programs and policies to ensure that our financially burdened and transit reliant customers still have equitable access in this alternative. Then against the goal of affordability, alternative B was pretty much neutral, because under this alternative, while the regional fare decreases, the local price stays the same. So only a portion of RTD customers would benefit. So that's why we didn't give that one a full-on green. Further, this alternative does not retain the price difference between the local and the regional trips. So even though somebody may be traveling further, they're not necessarily paying for that, whereas somebody who's just making a local trip is paying the same as they are. But against the goal of simplicity, pretty obviously, alternative B performed very well, with the fare structure being consolidated into 2 fare levels. Just the airport and non-airport travel obviously simplifies the system greatly. And I think, Colleen,
Yes.
that's you for questions.
Absolutely. Chris, thank you for the overview of alternative B, and we'll open it up to questions. And I think one of the first ones on our participants' minds is understanding the current data around how many trips are local, regional, and airport. So is it about a third of trips taken in each? Are most trips local? Can you talk a little bit about how many trips are currently taken in each of the fare levels?
I am trying to remember the exact number, and Bill, please jump in if Bill or Carl, if you know the numbers. I wanted to say, and I don't want to be quoted on this, I thought it was approximately 67% of our trips are local trips. And then as far as the regional airport, I'm not quite sure how the two break down with the remaining percentages. And that's certainly something we can provide a follow-up response on.
Absolutely. So if we ever say we'll provide a follow-up response on that fare study website, we will have the full meeting minutes as well as the Q&A. So for that respondent, take a look at the meeting summary after the meetings, and we'll make sure you have those numbers exactly. Another question about this, and this actually gets into some of the monthly and daily costs. So one question is around if RTD is implementing fare capping.
Oh, sorry.
Yes, is it implementing fare capping? And if so, what would that look like under these alternatives?
Yeah, so sorry. RTD is implementing fare capping, and just and I'm with the fare capping system, that would mean there's a maximum amount that anybody would pay, whether you're making a daily and a monthly trip. As long as you're using either the MyRide app or a MyRide card or a mobile ticket. So that means customers don't have to purchase a day or a monthly pass up front. Instead, they could just buy a 3-hour day pass in increments, but they would never pay more than the daily or the monthly max. It would automatically, once you hit that point, the system would make all future trips for the rest of, say, that month free. And if you are interested in learning more about fare capping, we do have an FAQ section on the Fare Feedback website, which provides additional information on that. But so the short answer, though, is with fare capping, that would apply to both alternatives that are under consideration.
And also to note, though, that fare capping is actually already being implemented with our new account-based ticketing system, which is, many of you probably noticed, has gone into place over the last 6 to 8 weeks.
Thank you, Bill. Thank you, Chris. We have a question. Actually, this is getting a little bit into the comparison of alternative A and B. One question is, are both fare alternatives modeled to generate equal fare revenue for RTD?
So we're in the process right now of modeling what the financial and the ridership implications would be with each one of these alternatives. So we don't have a good answer on that, but we are still, working through what that would mean for both, again, ridership and our finances, since obviously both of these would have impact on both of those issues.
Thank you, Chris. We have a question. This actually goes back to fare capping. So there's a attendee who's wondering what proportion of riders are actually paying cash, so therefore would not be able to use fare capping, and what might be some solutions for customers who are paying cash to be able to benefit from that system.
I can offer up the piece
thanks.
regarding for folks that utilize cash. I may call on someone that can speak to the percentage of cash as fare payment. But what we're looking to achieve as far as expanding our retail network. So specifically what this looks like, if you have the MyRide card and being able to load utilizing cash, whether it's at our sales outlets or specifically at this forthcoming retail network, what we're specifically looking to do is ensuring that, especially as we're looking at transit reliant or financially burdened customers, providing opportunities and having these retail networks dispersed throughout our service district, so they have that opportunity to be able to load cash onto their MyRide card. So that is something that is part of this initiative as it relates to fare capping.
And I do see that Monica is on the list, so I don't know if I'm going to call her out to see if she can answer the question about what percentage of our customers do pay with cash.
I can't tell you the percentage of customers, but I know it's usually about 10 to 12% of the fare revenue that RTD collects is the cash payments.
Thank you, Monica. That's super
Thanks,
helpful.
Monica.
Thank you, Bill and Carl as well. We have a question here. This is actually from a flight crew member who lives in Green Valley Ranch and is wondering how people like them are considered who are living in the outer areas of downtown or outer areas of Denver, but who are not going to downtown, but instead of the airport. So thinking about how the cost of $10 going when you're only going maybe 1 or 2 stops, and how that compares to other costs, say parking, or other ways of getting to the airport. So just would love some, I think they'd like some commentary about how are they being taken into account in terms of the distance actually traveled compared to the destination being the airport itself.
Sure, and I'll take that one, and I can let Chris and Carl fill in. Well, one thing is, we know that the airport customer is one of the ones that we've been looking at very closely and looking at multiple ways of dealing with it. Obviously, we've in both alternatives, we kept a higher fare for the airport, but we are looking ways to either through, a discount, which again, I read your question in the chat, and I think I'll just say this: if you have a $36 a month parking charge, it's going to be hard for us to beat that as a transit agency, because that's a really good deal. That's much lower than we pay downtown or anywhere else. And so if you've got that kind of, I'm not sure we're going to be able to compete on that level. But one of the things we are looking at is, can we look at working with the airport to create, an airport-wide EcoPass? I know that's been an ongoing discussion that we've been having. We are looking at different ways, with, I think Chris described, with the monthly pass, that you'd only have to travel 10 times in a month in order to pay for that pass. Now that pass is still $96, but which again, if you're paying $36 a month in parking, I think that's something I don't know if we're ever going to be able to compete with, just being completely honest with that.
Thank you, Bill. Well, I think I see one of the questions that's still in our queue is actually about alternative A. So Chris, I'm going to turn it back over to you to do the quick comparison. And so that way we can get both of those on the screen and be able to look at them side by side. So Chris, back to you to do the quick comparison of alternative A and B.
Yeah, so let's see, next slide. Okay, so on the next slide, well, first of all, very good questions. Certainly appreciate that. And as Colleen noted, on the next slide, we'll show you what the alternatives look like in kind of a side-by-side summary. So as you see on the right, on the left, alternative A, on the right, alternative B. And this slide's really just kind of highlighting the main components of both of these alternatives. One thing though that I do want to emphasize, and I know Carl already said this, but I want to emphasize it again, these are still preliminary structures that would likely be updated prior to the final recommendation. So I just want to know that these are, what you're seeing out here is not probably going to be the final alternative. We may kind of mix and match pieces based on the input that we receive. But as a recap, under alternative A, all customers would pay less, but this alternative would still retain the existing price structure that we have out there for the local, regional, and airport fares, meaning that higher fares are still charged for longer distances. Now, under alternative B, fare structure is greatly simplified by having just a single fare for all non-airport travel, and we would still retain a higher cost, or higher price for the airport. And in addition to that, though, the monthly pass provides access to all locations through the service area, including the airport. So just side by side, the big thing again, alternative A lowers fares for all types of travel. Alternative B eliminates, for the most part, the zones, or what we call a flat fare. So no matter where you're traveling, except for the airport, you would pay the same amount. So with that in mind, I'm going to put it back to you, Colleen, for additional questions.
Excellent, excellent. So I'm going to start with one question that is specific around alternative A. So it says alternative A seems to benefit local fare and monthly pass holders, and the 25 cents decrease might be too insignificant for those that are for others to acknowledge. So they're wondering if there is an option to reconfigure the zone structure altogether for an added benefit.
Well, one of the things, in addition to the reduction in all of the fares, whether it's the local, the regional, or the airport for alternative A, for both alternatives, and we'll talk more about this in just a couple of slides, we're also looking at, especially for our low-income customers, some additional expansion of our existing pass programs and discount programs. So we'll talk more about that a little bit in the coming up, but we do have quite a bit potential items that we believe would help our more financially constrained customers. So if we could hold that question maybe till after we go through those slides.
Excellent. There's also a question around, this goes back to folks who are paying cash. And one of the things that they see as a benefit of Plan B is that it's whole dollar amounts. And that one of the problems potentially for Alternative A is that carrying change, it's not efficient, it's not common, it's not easy. And so is there a consideration to round down Fare A to make them a whole dollar amounts for those who are paying cash?
Yeah, so, something else that we should also emphasize, as we noted, that these are still, sort of these aren't final alternatives, but, it's certainly something we could consider, and I'm making this up, 280 or something, so that for the discount fares, which are half, it's easier to figure out $1.40 than try to do the math of dividing the 5, which I can't easily do in my head. But.
Right. And I think, that question was brought up in some of our earlier rounds of engagement. And I think we said that we can't do a wholesale reduction, but we can stick to kind of, like said, Chris says, reasonable accounting. So, by 25-cent increments or 50-cent increments, I think is more of what we're looking at versus completely focusing on dollar increments.
Okay, so I think those are some of the questions we have around the two alternatives themselves. I'm going to actually move us into a quick poll, and then we'll get to some more Q&A. So would love to get a little bit of your feedback now. So you'll see in just a moment on your screen a poll that will ask you which alternative fare structure you prefer. So please do make your selection in the live poll. And then in the chat box, we want to hear from you. Why did you choose alternative A, or why did you choose alternative B? What's the feedback that's informing your preferences? Seeing lots of responses coming in. And thank you for those that are putting feedback into the chat box. I see folks saying simplicity, someone who prefers option A, and thinking that security on the routes, particularly when they change from local to regional, could help with the enforcement of the changing in fares. Lots more lots more reductions in how complicated it are. I see coming in the chat box. Lower fares also as a preference. Okay, so it looks like I think all the votes are in if we want to share those results. So this is some initial, a snapshot of who's on the call for some of the preferences. So thank you so much for giving us that feedback and for all of the feedback coming into the chat box. Okay. So I'm going to, I think we're going to turn it over to Bill now and get into some of the discount programs that will be part of the but that are also being considered as part of the FARE study.
Thanks, Colleen. So what I'm going to talk about is some other policies and programs that are under consideration, and these really go across both alternatives. So they're not unique to A or B. We're considering them under any alternative that we would bring forward to the board. And again, there really is two categories here. One is the focus on improving access for financially burdened customers, where we're looking at, how do we deal with discounts and increasing access through the LIVE program and other means. And the other one is really simplifying the pass programs and promoting the opportunity to buy passes. So under the first one, we're looking at, changes in discount levels. Like I said, expanding the LIVE program access either through by changing and expanding the income level or looking at expanding access through ways other than through the peak system, which we currently operate. We also have heard a lot from nonprofits, especially as we've implemented the LIVE program, where we kind of discontinued our nonprofit program as it was originally intended, that they really feel left out, and particularly those that have focused on, those kind of emergency needs for fare media, whether it would be something like a battered women's shelter or something like that. you know, can we offer them like a grant program? We can have a deeply discounted option for some of those options. Also, another thing that we've looked at is how do we address affordable housing and giving them, you know, a special discount or approach. And then lastly, on this category, looking at, you know, college users and those that particularly don't participate in the College Pass program, and that might be more associated with the community colleges, some of the other smaller colleges that are on our system, that, you know, maybe we could look at a semester type pass where it's not an all-in college type insurance model that the College Pass is. On the simplifying side, we're looking at, you know, ways that we can encourage people to buy passes and you know, doing a bulk discount. Again, this is an alternative to our EcoPass program. And then on the EcoPass side, actually trying to simplify things, I think particularly for those users that are in the smaller employers, because we've heard a lot about the complications of the EcoPass and trying to figure out how much they have to pay, and we're looking at ways to simplify that. So next slide, please. So in the discount phase, so what are we actually considering? On the Live side, the one thing that we are recommending is upping the discount level for Live. So currently it's a 40% discount. We're looking to up that to 50% Live discount, which is consistent with our senior and our persons with disability discount. So that we are recommending. Other things that we were considering, including a 70% discount for customers that would pay, would utilize a monthly pass. We think this may incentivize some of them to look to a monthly pass product versus what they do today, and having that extra discount may, you know, afford them the opportunity to look at buying a monthly pass. Also looking at a single fare, regardless of kind of where they travel to. In other words, this would be, which I'll explain in a future slide, you know, that you would, if you were, your current discount of 90 cents for youth or $1.50 for seniors would apply to anywhere they would travel within the district. And I mentioned earlier the free fares for youth. The one caveat that we do want to say this has, you know, probably the biggest impact on our fare revenue, because the youth do represent a significant portion of our ridership. I think in the 8 to 10% range. That this could have a large enough impact. We'd look to others try to kind of you know, support us in this effort, and we know that this is certainly a trend around the country. Other areas, I know that the state of Washington did institute a free fares for youth requirement across transit agencies within that state. So this is something that is within the transit industry is gaining a lot of traction. Also looking at, like I mentioned, the opportunities for improving access to the Live program. Talked about how can we do that. Expanding the Live eligibility, looking at you know, expanding from 185% of the federal poverty level to 200%. So again, trying to expand that access. And the one thing that again is not under consideration, which I think most people would probably understand, is that we're not looking to reduce the discount for youth. That was one thing that was mentioned earlier, but we're not looking to do that. Next slide, please. So what would a 70% monthly pass look like? So if you think about it, it would apply to, like I said, you know, Live customers, seniors, and persons with disabilities. Looking at alternative A, that would be a $27 monthly pass for the local side and a $48 monthly pass for the regional and airport side. Alternative B, again, it would just be one single price of about 29 bucks. So again, fairly steep discount. We think this can provide some of that incentive for you know, people to take advantage of a monthly pass product. On the use side, again, they already received the 70% discount, so we're not proposing this exclusively that it would change their discount. Next slide, please. So why are we looking at a monthly discount? I think one of the reasons is, you know, we do want to reward frequent customers, and again, we think it does provide that greatest relief for those that are financially burdened. And we think it does provide incentive for them to go to that kind of a product, because again, if they're having trouble looking at today's prices, you know, coming up with the money for a monthly pass, if we can significantly reduce that, hopefully, you know, they could find a wherewithal to pay for that monthly pass within their budget. Next slide. So the single discount fare, I kind of mentioned this earlier, but again, looking at as an option that there would be a single fare for those discount customers. And again, if you look at today's discounts, that would be like $1.50 for senior, and live, again, assuming we go to the 50%, for traveling anywhere in the district, whether they're traveling on a local, regional, or airport route. And then on youth, similarly, it would be a 90-cent fare. Next. So again, one of the things that, why are we looking at a single fare? I think, we're looking to maintain, some level of differentiation overall, but we think, providing that single fare can really impact the minority and low income folks that we work with. And so that we think can benefit those that are financially burdened. Also, I think that eliminating the higher fare for the regional airport trips, we think can actually, increase the accessibility throughout the region, because then again, that opportunity to then to have that one single fare to get anywhere, I think is a benefit for them. So I think with that, I'll turn it back over to Colleen.
Thanks, Bill. And yes, we have some questions coming in. So if you have questions, please make sure you're submitting them in the Q&A box on the policies and programs that Bill just described. One of the first ones we have is specifically about the bulk purchases. And so they're wondering, does that mean the 10 ticket booklets or something else? And will, under these proposals, would the 10 coupon discount booklets be maintained?
I'll try to address that, because I think, that question has come up, and I believe, doing some of those things, we may end up eliminating the 10 ride ticket book as part of this process if we were to, do many of the things we're talking about. It's not for sure, but I think that's the direction that we're going, is talking about eliminating that as a product.
Chris or Carl, anything you want to add on the bulk purchase?
And I'm sorry, I don't know if I heard the complete question on whether or not, so as far as the bulk purchases, though, that we would also offer, and I'm again not sure if this was specifically what the question was asking, like for employers or charitable organizations could buy tickets in bulk and have, say, got a 10% discount, but we would have, and we haven't established what that would be, a minimum number of tickets that would have to be purchased in order to be eligible for that discount.
Excellent. So, so the bulk purchase discounts are actually talking about the employer or organizations that are able to buy them at a large amount, not necessarily the individual 10 ticket booklets, but those 10 ticket booklets may or may not be in
Correct.
place once some of these new programs are established. Thank you both. Oh, go ahead, Carl.
Yeah, the only thing I just wanted to offer up too, just to the point with regards to these different alternatives of the fare structure and the potential considerations of what we're looking at for our programs and policies, is a good evaluation that we're also doing, which is part of this project, is the equity analysis. And I've seen that in the comment box, there are a lot of different folks that may or may not be familiar with the equity analysis, but that is a big component of this study, where for any potential changes to the fare structure, whether it's and our programs and policies, we'll need to do an equity analysis to ensure that we aren't inadvertently impacting or negatively impacting Title VI populations, specifically minority and low income. So before we can eliminate anything or make any changes, that we'll have to undertake an extensive equity analysis as part of this project.
Thank you, Carl. So we have a question here about the semester pass and whether or not semester fare capping would be available to college students.
I don't know. I'm not sure if we thought about it. I don't know if Monica has any input to that, but I'm not sure. At least I haven't heard that come up as an option, because I think we've looked at the fare capping for the day pass or the monthly pass. I haven't heard about it for the semester pass.
Yeah, this is Monica. I don't think we've kind of, once we need to figure out what is, will we have a semester pass? and how will it be priced, and then we'll, figure out how we will implement it on what kind of fare product. So no, we have not determined that yet.
Excellent. Thank you, Monica. A question about the potential eco-passing. So is there any more information available on the potential eco-pass pricing for smaller employees or smaller employers? Sorry.
No, we don't have anything specific. I think the thing that it's really about simplifying and making a little bit more predictable. I think those are some of the things that we've heard. Simplifying the zone structure or the SLA service. I can't remember what the SLA stands for, but
Level.
Service level area matrix, which is hugely complicated. We want to simplify that. Also, we're looking at we've heard a lot from people about how EcoPass is difficult to budget for because it changes year to year. And so we're trying to look at that and make it maybe a little bit more predictable. And maybe it's, a price is good for multiple years. So that's certainly something on the table that we're looking at.
Thank you, Bill. And I do want to note, so we're going over at a very high level some of these policies and programs on the Fare Feedback website. There is a policies and programs tab that has lots and lots of details about not only these, but other programs and policies under consideration. So do make sure to check that out after the call.
And
go ahead, Carl.
I just wanted to offer up too, I definitely appreciate, or we definitely appreciate the feedback received. So what we're ultimately trying to achieve as we're sourcing through the data and the feedback from these customer and community meetings, ideas such as you put forward to make sure that as we are fine tuning these considerations under these various past programs and our policies, is to make sure that we're leaving no stone unturned to be able to formulate what the end product or potential end product will be. So we just appreciate the feedback as another additional point of consideration. So thank you.
Thank you, Carl. There's a question. One of the participants here tonight said they liked it when there was a discount for MyRide card holders. With the new card, there's no longer a discount. And is RTD considering bringing that back?
So that's a great question. So as part of the fare capping coinciding with the account-based ticketing system, as part of that ticketing system, there was not a need to have those discounts applied, since fare capping already inherently bakes in or builds in the discount. So we conducted an equity analysis to make sure that we were moving in the right direction, and based off of that analysis, it showed that there was no impacts. So as part of the account-based ticketing and fare capping. So great question.
Thank you, Carl. So something else we're seeing in the chat box are some comparisons to other cities, and this is going back a little bit to the alternatives, just so you know. There's some comparisons to other cities' transit costs to and from the airport. So some in the audience are wondering, what are the factors that are actually going into the price of the RTD fare to the airport?
I'll try to take this. I mean, a couple things, the big change with the airport fare was discussed a lot in 2016 when we made that fare change. A couple of reasons. One, obviously going to the airport, providing that convenient connection, I would say, and I'll just say this, I said this on another meeting I was at, I think Denver is probably one of the, if not the most convenient connections that you can get. Getting off the train and walking up the escalator and you're in security line. I think most other airports, and I'll use Seattle as an example, where you have to walk through, two different parking structures to get into the airport itself. There's several more stops along the way. It's a little bit more of an express route. So there is that kind of, I think it's more of a premium type service. The way I would look at it, and the distance. It is 20. I think I don't know if Chris or Carl remember. It's like 22 miles from downtown to the airport. So that's a significant distance, and I think that is probably quite a bit further than a lot of the examples that were provided.
Thank you, Bill. We do have a question here, and I know that'll it'll be addressed in a few slides, but I do want to get it out now while we're in the Q&A section. When can we expect to see the final fare structure implemented, assuming that it goes through the public review process smoothly?
Yeah, so I know early on in the presentation, we had the slide which showed when it would go to the RTD board, which we're expecting to be sometime probably in the next in 2023 spring timeframe. Ideally, if we could then implement it the following year, so January of 2024, that would be kind of our perfect world. There's a lot of background things that have to happen in order for us to establish the new fare, in terms of, you know, none of these are huge things, but a lot of just I don't know, death by a thousand cuts. All the fare ticket vending machines have to be reprogrammed. New maps, new materials have to be put out. We would also have to adjust the schedule, recognizing that there's probably going to be some changes to demand on certain routes and services. So a lot of background things have to happen, but yeah, in our perfect world, it would be January of 2024.
And
I think you can look at a minimum of 6 months, but
Yeah.
like Chris said, that the complicating factors of some of the things that we have to do, and I know Monica probably could talk for several minutes on
Yes.
all the things that go into putting in and implementing a new fare structure, especially the type of change that we're talking about, which is could be pretty dramatically different.
And I would, yeah, also offer up to it, it'd be more or less a graduated approach, where there are some considerations that may take or may be easier to implement.
Yeah.
So full implementation, to Chris's point, but there may be some items that we could implement a lot sooner, depending on operational considerations and so forth.
Excellent. Well, thank you all. And I think for the to make sure that we're respecting everyone's times tonight, I'm going to move us into the polls that we have related to the discount program. So our first poll is around the 70% monthly pass discount. And should RTD consider that for customers who are paying discounted fares? And as a reminder, this would be applicable to all adult customers. So while they would pay 50% discount on the 3-hour and day pass, they would pay a 70% discount for the monthly pass. And this is not related to youth, as they already receive a 70% discount across the board. So thank you. I see lots of responses coming in. This is another place where we can also get feedback in the chat box. So if you have some reasoning behind why you've said yes or no, would love to hear that in the chat box. And I do see at least one person said 70% discount for monthly pass is a good idea. Thank you for those comments. We'll move now into the fifth and final poll question of the evening. So we're now wanting to know if customers who are paying discounted fares should pay just one fare to travel anywhere in the RTD service area, and that would include travel to the airport. And this would be universal for all adult customers who are paying discount fares, as well as youth customers. So please, again, put your preference in the poll and give that feedback in the chat box. Someone says, let's make it easy. Let's encourage more transit use. Less cars on the road equals less traffic. All right, well, thank you so much. We will we'll take a look at the results. And just as a reminder, these are, thank you so much for giving these results tonight. We also are collecting feedback in a live survey right now. And so if you'd like to give your feedback there, or if you have other friends who were not able to join tonight, definitely encouraging feedback in those areas. So let's get closed out for the evening. Victoria, if we can go to the next slide, and we'll move straight into the next steps. So as I just mentioned, if you haven't already, please visit the Fare Feedback website, where you can take the survey and give additional feedback, but also dig deep into some of those details of not only the fair alternatives, but also those policies and programs and the frequently asked questions there that get a little bit deeper into some of the topics we've covered tonight. We'll be looking in the early 2023. There will be a public comment and hearing process with the final fair recommendation. That again, all of the information you saw tonight is some preliminary ideas and the feedback you give and your peers give over the next month will be helping to inform what that final recommendation looks like that will be available to you early next year. So Chris, I think with that, it's over to you for some final words.
Yeah, just real quick, I want to put in one more plug for please take the survey. Even if you forget the website address, just type in RTD Fair Study and it will be your top hit. A little ways down on the website, you'll see take survey here. So really want to hear what people are thinking. And then lastly, of course, we certainly appreciate your participation tonight. Thank you for all the questions, good questions. And we certainly appreciate your time and your interest in this. So thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone. Have a great evening. Go visit the Fair Study website and look for the summary of comments. If your question wasn't answered tonight, we will also have some additional details there in the meeting summary after the fact. Thank you so much. We appreciate your time.